Yo, you already saw it. You already saw it with your own two eyes, and now you need someone to break it down for you. Because what just happened in Indianapolis is not just a viral clip, it is a moment that could define the entire future of a franchise. I'm Dre Fiver, this is Street Hoops, and today we are going all the way in on what is now the most explosive coaching situation in women's basketball. Caitlin Clark, Stephanie White, one-arm grab, and a relationship that the entire WNBA world is now watching under a microscope. No fluff, no sugarcoating. Street Hoops never does that. Let's get into it. Let me set the scene for you. It's May 17th, 2026. The Indiana Fever are hosting the Seattle Storm at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Caitlin Clark goes on to put up 21 points, 10 assists, and 7 rebounds, leading Indiana to an 8-9, 7-8 victory. On paper, a good night, a winning night. But what happened on that bench during a timeout is what the entire basketball world is talking about. The broadcast camera catches it. Stephanie White walks over to Caitlin Clark, and she grabs her arm, not taps her on the shoulder, not points in her direction, grabs her arm. And Caitlin Clark, the most important player in women's basketball, the woman who has single-handedly rewritten the economic story of this league, physically pulls her arm away and walks away in front of the cameras, in front of the crowd, in front of the whole world watching on television. Dre's personal opinion? Whether this turns out to be a big deal or absolutely nothing, the fact that we're all sitting here watching that clip on loop tells you everything you need to know about the state of this franchise right now. Now here is the first thing I need you to notice about that clip, and I mean really notice. It is not just Clark and White in that frame. Look at the bench. Kelsey Mitchell is right there. The assistant coaches are right there, and not a single one of them reacts. Not a head turn, not a step forward, not even so much as a glance in that direction. Why? Because this isn't shocking to them. This is a regular occurrence. This is Tuesday. The fact that nobody on that bench flinched tells you this dynamic between Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White is not some one-time blow-up that got out of hand. This is a pattern. This is the operating mode of this coaching relationship. And that right there, is the thing that should have Fever fans wide awake at night. Now I want to be fair here, because this is Street Hoops, and we give you the full picture, not just the clickbait version. There is an argument, and it is a legitimate argument, that what we are watching is not dysfunction at all. It might be coaching strategy. Think about the greatest players in basketball history. Michael Jordan needed Phil Jackson in his face. Kobe Bryant would have taken a coach out back behind the building if that coach tried to coddle him. These are elite competitors who needed friction to perform at the highest level. And here is the thing about Caitlin Clark that every serious basketball person knows. She is a rhythm player. She performs better when the temperature is turned all the way up. When there is a rivalry, when something is on the line, when someone has gotten under her skin, that is not speculation. That is a documented on-court fact. And after that timeout on May 17th, she put up a triple-double adjacent line against the Storm, and the Fever won by 11. So you tell me, was that confrontation productive? Maybe. But there is a much bigger question sitting underneath this entire story, and that question is whether Indiana is playing with fire that they have absolutely no plan to put out. Let's rewind the calendar a little bit, because this Stephanie White situation did not start with an arm grab during a timeout. It started much earlier, and the signs have been building for anyone paying close attention. During the Fever's game against the Washington Mystics just days before the Storm incident, Stephanie White made the decision to bench Caitlin Clark for an extended stretch in the second quarter, and the basketball world lost its mind. We are talking about benching a player who is averaging career highs across the board in her third professional season. Through the first 4 games of 2026, Clark was putting up career-high averages of 24.3 points on 42.5% shooting and 9.0 assists per game. You have a player performing at that level, on that kind of historic trajectory, and your coaching decision is to park her on the bench for 6 straight minutes during a close game. Dre's personal opinion? I don't care what system you are running. I don't care what rotation philosophy you subscribe to. You do not sit Caitlin Clark for 6 consecutive minutes in the second quarter of a regular season game that your team needs. That is not strategy. That is ego. And the basketball internet agreed loudly and unanimously. Analysts and commentators across every platform were calling the decision outright coaching malpractice. People were genuinely confused, not just fans. Credible basketball voices, asking out loud why Stephanie White kept a diminished, slowed-down lineup on the floor for that extended stretch while the most dangerous offensive weapon in the league watched from the pine. And here is the gut punch part of that story. The Fever fought back. They dragged themselves back into that game. They forced overtime. And then they lost in overtime, 104 to 102, dropping to 1-2 on the season. So you benched your best player, you lost a game you almost won, and then the timeout footage from that same game started making its rounds on social media. At some point, the Fever front office has to ask themselves a serious question. How many of these moments can we afford before this becomes a story we cannot control? But wait, because it gets worse, or more complicated, depending on which side of this argument you are on. After that Mystics game, the one where Caitlin Clark dropped 32 points, knocked down 7 three-pointers, and hit a game-tying shot to force overtime and almost single-handedly dragged this team back from the dead, here is what Stephanie White did in front of the cameras. She praised the team's resilience. She talked about the group effort. She gave you Coach Speak 101. What she did not do, what she conspicuously, almost aggressively did not do, was look into that camera and say the words, "Caitlin Clark was unbelievable tonight. 32 points, 7 threes, a clutch shot that sent us to overtime." And not a single direct word of praise. Now the fan reaction to that press conference was exactly what you would expect. People were furious. Comments ranged from saying White can never give Caitlin her flowers, to calling the entire coaching staff a joke, to demanding the front office make a change before this gets any more out of hand. And look, Dre has to be honest with you. I understand the counter-argument. Coaches talk about the team after losses. That is standard practice. That is professionalism. You do not want to single out one player in defeat because it implies everyone else did not show up. That is a real coaching philosophy, and it has merit, but context matters. Because this is not just any player on any team in any moment. When you have benching controversies on top of visible timeout confrontations, on top of that arm grab that everyone has now seen 15 times, maybe, just maybe, that is the one press conference where you drop the coach speak and you say something real. You don't have to undermine your authority to acknowledge greatness. Those two things are not mutually exclusive, and Stephanie White keeps choosing the path of least praise at the worst possible moments. Now let me give you the other side of this, because there are things about Stephanie White that do not get nearly enough credit in this conversation. Here is a woman who has publicly and loudly gone to war for Caitlin Clark when this league's referees were treating her like a practice dummy with a jersey on. After a 2025 loss to the New York Liberty where Clark appeared to get fouled on the final possession and the whistle never came, White stepped to that podium and blasted the officiating without hesitation. She said directly that she believed Clark got fouled. She did not dodge the question. She did not protect herself from a potential fine. She went on record defending her player against the league. That is your head coach willing to take a financial hit to stand up for Caitlin Clark. That is not the behavior of someone who resents her star player. And it gets even better than that. There is a moment from the 2025 season that perfectly captures what a healthy version of this relationship actually looks like. During a blowout win over the Las Vegas Aces, Stephanie White picked up a technical foul for going absolutely nuclear on the referees, and the broadcast cameras immediately cut to Caitlin Clark on the bench. And Clark jumped out of her seat. She was clapping. She was grinning. She was completely fired up, mouthing words that this is a family-friendly show, so we will let you use your imagination. That is your franchise player genuinely, authentically writing for her head coach. That is not a woman who hates her coach. That is chemistry. That is a real relationship. So now you have to reconcile that version of Clark and White with the version captured on camera during that Storm timeout. How do you hold both of those pictures at the same time? That is the question that nobody in this conversation is willing to sit with long enough. Here is what Dre Fiver actually thinks is going on, and I want you to hear this out because this is a take I have not heard anyone else fully articulate. I do not think the relationship between Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White is broken, but I think it is under enormous compounding pressure from a source that neither of them can fully control. And that source is the sheer weight of being the most important player in the history of this franchise, while still being asked to operate as a system piece inside a collective coaching philosophy. The WNBA, for most of its existence, has been built on a collective culture. Veterans get deference. Stars are still expected to share the spotlight. Coaches are the final authority in the room. Nobody questions that. Nobody challenges it. And then Caitlin Clark walked through the door and changed the entire economic equation of this sport overnight. In her third professional season, Clark is already setting records that nobody in this league is anywhere close to touching. She became the first player in WNBA history to record 12 games with at least 20 points and 10 assists in just 57 career games. The previous benchmark was held by a player who needed 436 games to get to 10. Let that sink in. 57 games versus 436. That is not a better player. That is a different species of basketball talent operating on a completely different timeline, and Stephanie White is trying to coach her using the same framework she used at Vanderbilt. The same framework coaches were using in this league before Caitlin Clark arrived and turned women's basketball into appointment television across the entire country. That is the fundamental tension. It is not personal, it is structural. White believes in systems. She believes in tough love and equal accountability. Those are all real, legitimate coaching principles. Clark is a player whose individual value to this organization, to the entire sport, is so astronomically high that the normal rules of equal accountability simply cannot apply the same way they apply to everyone else on that roster. Neither of them is wrong about their own position, but they are operating with fundamentally different understandings of what the power dynamic in that room is supposed to look like. And until the Indiana Fever front office figures out how to bridge that gap, how to get those two aligned, you are going to keep seeing arm grabs and pull-away moments on national television. Now let's address the elephant in the room. The word that nobody at Indiana Fever headquarters wants to say out loud, but that everybody else in the basketball world has been screaming since that clip went viral. Trade request. Is Caitlin Clark going to demand out? And if the Fever mismanage this situation badly enough, is that actually a realistic outcome? Here is the honest answer. Right now, no. Clark is under contract. She has no leverage to force a move at this moment. She has said nothing but positive things publicly about her coaching staff, her teammates, and the direction of the organization. Every single press conference, every single interview, Caitlin Clark has been complimentary and professional and on message. But right now and forever are two very different things in professional sports. And we have all seen this movie before. Players say the right things publicly, while privately counting the days until they have options. It's called being a professional. It is called protecting your trade value. It is called not wanting to be labeled as a difficult player before you have the leverage to make that label irrelevant. The window where Caitlin Clark is locked into Indiana without any ability to force a change is closing. And when that window opens, when she has real leverage, when multiple franchises would mortgage their entire roster and their next 3 draft classes to put her in a different uniform, what is going to determine her decision? It will be this: how she was treated during this stretch of her career, whether she felt respected, whether the person standing on that sideline made her feel like the most important player in this league or just another piece of a system, whether she felt like the Fever were building around her or managing around her. Those memories do not disappear. Those moments compound. And right now, Indiana is adding to a file of moments that a future Caitlin Clark, with leverage, with options, with the entire league wanting her, is going to look back on. And before anyone says Dre is being dramatic, let me remind you what happened the last time a franchise underestimated how quickly a superstar's patience could expire. The WNBA has already lived through situations where stars who seemed locked in walked out the door the moment they could. The difference is that none of those situations involved a player whose departure would crater franchise value, kill ticket sales, destroy sponsorship deals, and send the organization back to playing in half-empty arenas overnight. Caitlin Clark's happiness is not just a basketball question for Indiana. It is a business survival question, and the front office needs to understand that immediately if they don't already. Here is what I think needs to happen. And this is Dre talking directly to the Indiana Fever organization. Because I know you people watch this channel. You need to have a real conversation, not a PR conversation, not a media day conversation, a real one between your front office, your coaching staff, and your franchise player. About what this relationship is supposed to look like. About what Caitlin Clark needs to perform at her absolute ceiling. About whether Stephanie White's coaching approach is helping her get there or creating unnecessary friction along the way. Because here is the thing, and I want to be clear that I am not calling for White to be fired. Not yet. Not based on what we currently know. What I am saying is that good organizations do not wait for the breaking point. Good organizations see the smoke, and they address it before it becomes a fire that burns the whole building down. Because here is the other thing. The beat reporters, the credible local voices who cover this team every single day, they are not reporting major internal dysfunction right now. They are not sourcing anonymous players or agents making quiet noise about a broken locker room. And in professional sports, if something is truly broken, it leaks. Players talk to writers they trust. Agents make strategic comments to the right people at the right time. The relative quiet from those channels is meaningful. It suggests that while the coaching relationship is clearly intense, clearly confrontational at moments, and clearly complicated, it has not yet reached the point of no return. The fire has not consumed the building yet. But the smoke is visible, and the Fever cannot keep acting like they cannot smell it. So where does all of this leave us? Honestly, with more questions than answers, And that is the most honest thing Dre Fiver can tell you. Is what we are watching productive tension between a demanding coach and the most competitive player in the sport, or is it dysfunction that is being held together with professional duct tape while the clock ticks toward a reckoning? Is Stephanie White the right coach to develop a generational talent into the best version of herself, or is her style fundamentally structurally incompatible with managing a player of Caitlin Clark's profile and her profile's importance to the league? Is Caitlin Clark genuinely bought in, genuinely competing, genuinely fine with the intensity of this relationship? Or is she doing what every elite professional athlete is trained to do? Smile for the cameras and count the days. We will not know the answer to any of those questions today. Maybe not this season. But what we do know is this. The Indiana Fever are sitting on the most valuable player in the history of their franchise. A player who is rewriting record books in year 3. A player who has made this organization relevant in a way that it has never been before. And right now, on national television, in front of hundreds of thousands of people watching and clipping and posting and analyzing every frame, the relationship between that player and her head coach looks complicated, looks tense, looks like something that requires attention. And the question is whether the people making decisions inside that building are paying close enough attention to know the difference between a fixable situation and a ticking clock. Because if they get this wrong, if they let pride or ego or a coaching philosophy become more important than keeping Caitlin Clark happy in an Indiana Fever uniform, they will lose the most important asset their franchise has ever had. And no draft pick, no trade package, no offseason signing will ever replace what walks out that door. This is either everything or nothing. And Indiana better figure out which one it is before Caitlin Clark figures it out for them. That is the Street Hoops breakdown of the Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White situation, and I need to know what you think is really going on inside that locker room. Is this just two intense competitors who push each other and make each other better? Or are we watching the early stages of a split that ends with the most important player in WNBA history in a different city? Drop it in the comments right now. I am reading every single one. And if you are new to Street Hoops, what are you doing? Smash that subscribe button, hit the like button on this video, and tell a friend who needs to hear this breakdown. Dre Fiver. Street Hoops. We do not do filters here. We will see you in the next one.